Our next speaker, Dr. Bob Thibadeau, is a computational cognitive scientist working on how humans process natural language since 1973, natural language reading. With the advent of the internet, he began serious work to understand how digital books might be best consumed and written by experimenting with the internet presence of existing books. Dr. Thibadeau's talk is on early experiments in digital libraries. Bob?
Okay, thank you. Let me try to bring up, before I do this, let me give you a sort of a overview of the content of the talk so that you can follow. So at the end of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about this book from 1883 and a little quote I found in the front of the book that I think is very pertinent to what we're trying to do here. The real topic of this talk is going to be on how books, how we can bring the magic of books to the internet. And I will argue that human natural language is completely central to that, including the AI and so forth, and that's possible. And I'm also going to be, a theme of this talk is not just the past research, but past is future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how past is future and how that actually works. The way we'll introduce this talk is I'm going to essentially a little short information from Carl Sagan, which really defines how books are magic. And I'm going to read this. What an astonishing thing the book is. It's a flat object made from a tree with flexible parts on which are imprinted lots of funny dark squiggles. But one glance at it, and you're inside the mind of another person, maybe somebody dead for 1,000 years. Across the millennia, an author is speaking clearly and silently inside your head, directly to you. Writing is perhaps the greatest of human inventions, binding together people who never knew each other, citizens of distant epochs. Books break the shackles of time. A book is proof that humans are capable of working magic. So that is why we're doing what we're doing today. So the research that I did years ago on digital libraries and so forth found it, or actually we're studying the idea of the internet as a surface for books, as a place that you can access books, a new place that you could access books. And of course, the internet being the internet, there are layers to this. So the lowest layer, which is layer 0, is what the libraries were commonly doing back then, which is producing their library catalogs online, which is basically the name of a book and the author and date of publication and the cataloging number of the book, which didn't really give you any idea of the magic of the books that were underlying the catalog numbers. So we sort of started with the first level, which is what we called universal interfaces, which was scanning the paper, scanning the books themselves and associating with the scans of the books themselves with the metadata about the books, including copyright information. And that provided us with a basic way in which people could read books. The next layer above that is what I call the language interfaces, and you could call the digital interfaces, which are the characters, digitally readable characters, the words, the formatting, the pictures, the formulas, the tables, and the like, that you could actually grab out of the book. So if you wanted a formula, you could grab it out and put it in something that you're writing and so forth and so on. Or you could grab text out of a book and use it in what you're writing and so forth and so on. And machines could do the same thing. So people could do it and machines could do it. The next level up is the search interfaces for the books, which are things like natural language processing, query formation, finding the tables and the formulas associated with particular things, and most importantly, the machine translation that was associated with the book. So I could get the book that may be in French, and I could read the book in English. Then the next level up from that, and now we're getting into stuff that hasn't been done very well so far, are the topical investigations, the paths of thinking and following, the lines of time and lines of thought, explaining things. And among the things that I think we would like to look at in terms of explaining stuff, we'll get into in just a minute. But it's things like give me the history of our knowledge of electromagnetism, and teach me how electromagnetism, the human thought about electromagnetism changed over the years. So I'd be going out and it would be finding those things and then pulling it together. And we see this in course packs that are developed today, and so forth and so on. And course packs also have copyright constraints. And you can imagine if you have a machine that's producing the course pack, essentially the course, the very ephemeral teaching, that it could be extracting from different books and marking the right situations for the copyrights. And then the final level is level 5, which is the magic interface. This is when books become as good on the internet as they were in person. And here, one of my arguments going to be is that we must preserve the natural language. Turning books into pictures is not a good idea. Okay. Turning books into actors and scripts is not great. What you really want to do is you want to, your options are allowing people to read them and then listen to them. Something that preserves natural language, the natural language experience, because from a psychological point of view, quite frankly, we now know that natural language is unique in a very, very real way among all animals. It's the only means in which one neocortex can speak directly to another neocortex and speak to the state and what's going on inside of the neocortex. So, for example, everybody's got the experience of failed neocortical communication. When you can't speak somebody else's language and they can't speak your language, you're stuck on a level of communication without natural language. And now all of a sudden you can make signs and you can say you're happy and hungry and you want to run around and all this other stuff, but you can't do what natural language can do by way of communication. And really what Carl Sagan was pointing out in this thing of when you read a book, the words come out inside your mind. And you are actually doing the strict neocortex to neocortex communication. And there is no replacement to that. It's not possible. And there are reasons, scientific reasons for that, which I don't have time to go into. So what we were doing from a research perspective was we were going up those 5 levels, and we were defining what we thought should be the universal interfaces for each of those 5 levels, for either machines to talk through those levels or people to explore through those levels. So at the lowest level, there'd be things like the book selection, the cataloging number of the author and so forth, intake requirements, the scan requirements. So for example, if I was trying to talk to an archive, I may say, and this is a very important one, I may say, I demand the color, the pages in color. I want to see the original color images of each page as I read them. Okay. Just because I want to. Okay. And it may back, the interface may come back and say to me, all I have is the black and white. All I have is the image of the page. And I may say that's not good enough. I may not want to see it. But the archive can now note that a request for a color image of the page was made, or these pages were made, or the color images for the book pages is made. And the person did not then accept my offer of the black and white. So from an archivist or a library point of view, I can now know there's been a request made for a color version of what I've got in black and white in my archive. That same kind of process, that same kind of interface process works for virtually anything you can do with the material in a book. Okay, you can say, I want to find the information about Benjamin Franklin that's in this book. And the archive may say, I can give you the book, you look for it, okay? Or it can say, here's the information about Ben Franklin. If it says, I can give you the book, and then you don't take any of the book, then the archive can know it had better figure out how to pull the information on Ben Franklin out if it wants to service that request. Okay. So this kind of requirement of the archive, that the archive can log and understand that these are requests for what people want out of the archives, becomes important. That same mechanism allows you to meter the copyrights. And so down through these levels, the language interfaces, which is optical character recognition. Ideally, you never want only one of these. We learned optical character recognition is flawed. Typically, you'd like to have 3 systems of optical character recognition to sort of guarantee that you've got a good result. Other forms of pattern recognition, the search interfaces, again, you've got the same sort of requirements. You'd like to have, you'd like to be able to search in terms of organizations of material across books as well as within books. The content and interfaces, this is new stuff. This is a largely untouched area for automated systems, which are automated course packs, essentially, that are guided by the instructor to develop. But it's highly automated, so the instructor is not trying to work copyright issues and all this other stuff. And then the magic interfaces, which we'll get to in just a second, having to do with this neocortical to neocortical thing and how the human brain computes. So the Universal Digital Library, we need books created dynamically from old books, adapted constantly to new human knowledge as it appears in original new books written by people. We want to use past research to accelerate advanced research by advancing the access to knowledge. And then the role of natural human language to create the magic cannot be underestimated. People who try to think that they can keep the magic of books without people understanding the language that the book is presented in is impossible. You lose the magic, and it's just not a question. So one of the things I've been suggesting recently is what I call a spare time research model, which does not mean research in your spare time, or it could mean research in your spare time, but it only sort of half does. What it means is that most of us spend a lot of our days in situations where we're doing nothing, we're wasting our brains. And so in a car, when you're driving, you're wasting your brain. In a restaurant and you're waiting for somebody or waiting for something and you're sitting there alone or even with people, and there's time that you're just sort of wasting your brain. You don't even want to talk to the people that are there, or otherwise just waiting, okay? And we'd like to be able to have a person access books and get the magic of books while the vehicle is driving. So right now we have Audible that does a wonderful thing. But it's got a problem in that if you're actually trying to get some real content, maybe the book had pictures in it, maybe it had figures and graphs, maybe it had tables and so forth and so on in it. And we'd like your car to be able to sit there and make the requests of the archives, and then actually notice when the car is in a safe situation where presenting you with a figure or a graph or a picture is safe, because the car has determined that it's okay for you to look over at the 17-inch screen on your right or the left, depending on what part of the world you're coming from. So automated driving should be able to do these interface accesses and be sensitive to when book content can be provided to a person while he's driving. Or if you're in a lecture and you're bored by the lecture and you just want to go to your phone and look at stuff, it needs to know that it can't talk to you. But it needs to know that the circumstances are such that if it needs to do something with you, it's not going to interfere with whatever it is that you want to be able to do.
Okay. 2 minutes, Bob.
Yep. So this is what I call the spare time research model, which is what can you do in your spare time to learn from the books, and largely because there are just too many books for a human being to read in his lifetime. And there's too many great books for a person to read in his lifetime, and so forth and so on. So I had I was looking for a quote, or actually I was looking for the elephant poem. This is John Sachs, the book with the elephant poem in him that talks about people seeing the pieces of the elephant, not seeing the whole elephant, and so forth and so on. But it turns out that there was at the beginning of the book, there was a written quotation written on May the 13th or the 23rd of 1885. And this quotation is not of a John Sachs poem, but a poem by Thomas More, which I believe perfectly captures the beauty of old books. And I'll read this segment of this poem by Thomas More. Thomas More died, and this is not Sir Thomas More, this is another Thomas More, died in 1852. Let fate do her worst. There are relics of joy, bright dreams of the past, which she cannot destroy, which come in the nighttime of sorrow and care, and bring back the features that joy used to wear. This is what books are about. And I found that in this book. This morning, I searched the internet to find out that it was Thomas More who wrote this poem. There was no, I had no idea who wrote the poem. I couldn't even read all of the printed letters here, but I found enough of it that I could put into Google that last line, and it brought up the poem. It turned out I'd misinterpreted the first line, but I found it, and I found the original, and I could now access what this person in 1885 wrote as the summary of what this book was about to him. So that's my talk.